Lap 20. Sabrina says she's gonna be late for her school bus. Isn't it obvious she could just freeze time and solve this problem? Or at least slow it down? Hilda says she's still got so much shopping to do for a witch's party. This is the second time her partying has been mentioned, and it's still out of character for this grump who only ever seems to interact with other witches in the Witch Mart. And she doesn't have to do any shopping. She can zap stuff up. I guess she means she has potion ingredients to buy. Zelda just doesn't have the time to take Salem to the vet. Freeze time and teleport to the vet. She can stir her potion brew anytime. Ambrose tells them that the answer to their problems is obviously to use magic. I'm glad Hilda and Sabrina lampshade their own stupidity. But since this is happening at the start of a story, I'm guessing their magic will be forced by the writing to backfire on them. Maybe they'll be stupid enough to cast the wrong spell because they did their first stupid impulse. Sabrina makes the school bus wait for her. Everyone would want to be able to do that, so no wonder it was written. And she doesn't want to freak out everyone on the bus by warping to them, because then she'd have to erase their memories of it. Hilda zaps up a supermarket shopping cart to do her shopping telekinetically, even though it'd freak out the people seeing it. Della would whine at her for it, right? Or not, because the spy witches would just erase their memories, or they just dismiss it as a hallucination. Zelda zaps Salem off to the vet by himself. There's no reason she'd think she could get away with this. Wouldn't she need to be there? He'd be mistaken for a stray. Well, the vet should know Salem by now. But he'd still refuse to go on with the appointment without her, because that's not how things are done. Zelda could zap up a duplicate of herself instead. Sabrina realistically sees a repairman near the bus. And miraculously, when she tells the bus driver that if he starts the bus, it'll work, he actually does do what he's told, instead of not respecting her at all, which is unrealistic. But I take someone being nice over real-life behavior any day. He says that he's so late that they'll never make it to school in time. So Sabrina uses magic to fly the bus. They're all gonna have to be made to forget this. It's pretty funny that we see a text bubble from the grocery cart telling the clerk, "Here's a $100 bill. Please deposit the change in one of my grocery bags." And he says that all that overtime is catching up to him. Thankfully, the vet does decide to go through with the appointment, despite Zelda being absent, and doesn't even ask why she's not here. But when he gets threatened with a shot, which Zelda should have anticipated, he gives the vet a shot, standing on his two legs, which irritates me because he never did that nonsense in the 70s comic. And that shot would be bad for the vet, so that's not funny. Ambrose then sees his car coming back from the car wash, and says that thanks to magic, he doesn't have to buck the nasty traffic lines, as he floated to him instead. And of course he can get away with this. Anyone who'd see it would just be dismissed as a liar, like anyone who reports UFOs. It's annoying that after Sabrina says that when you handle your problems the intelligent way, it eliminates all the tension in life, the story portrays her as wrong by showing people running in fear in front of them. When what she said wasn't wrong, it was just that they were using magic irresponsibly. They want to run past their house. It would make sense if they ran towards them an angry mob, but why would they coincidentally run past their house? I guess they all coincidentally live near their house. Why would they still be scared enough to run after all that time? That doesn't happen. Well, at least nothing bad happened to the main characters, like I thought. I don't think every story should be like that, but it's nice to happen once in a while. This story was about Sabrina using magic so that she won't be late for the bus, only to have to fly the bus to school to get there in time and freak people out. Because she didn't simply think to freeze time itself so she could have all the time in the world to get to the bus. Zelda warps Salem to the vet without her, without explaining why she thinks what she's doing now can't wait. And Salem gives the vet a shot, revealing his magical abilities. Because somehow Zelda didn't anticipate that she'd be needed to erase the vet's memory of how he reacts to a shot every time, after all the times she brought him to the vet. So that was forced. At least I can buy Sabrina being a ditz and making the wrong decision when presented with multiple potential options at a second's notice. And Hilda cast a spell to make a shopping cart do her shopping for her. I wish I knew what she was doing now that was so important that she couldn't spare the time to do that in person. She and Zelda start out in the kitchen, So if they were doing chores, couldn't they just zap to instantly get them all done? Her scene was worth it because it was hilarious seeing the cart talk to the cashier. I love that in a twist. Instead of the writing being mean-spirited to the main characters, it only had regular civilians get freaked out by the magic, without any consequences to them, because that's what I expected. While I could say it's bad writing to have main characters be Karma Houdinis, I like those characters. Them freaking people out with magic never has any serious consequences past the story where it happens anyways. So it's like it never happened. And I'd rather take a story that's nice to them over a story that makes Sabrina miserable, like the animated series. The story just ends with them wondering why the civilians don't learn to relax like them. I'm just glad Della didn't irritate me in this story. It can easily be explained away that she didn't show up because spy witches are trusted to eventually erase their memories, after a while. And they don't know who exactly is responsible for the magical event with the shopping cart. That could have been any witch. Betting me 182. Ambrose tells Sabrina he sees the first true sign of spring. She looks forward to seeing a bird or flower, and it turns out it's Hilda's new hat, which is full of flowers. This only makes sense because even early on, Hilda took care of flowers. So she always liked them, but it still seems unlike her because she hardly wants to be seen as harmless. Everything's Archie 149. Sabrina wonders if Hilda ever kept a diary. Hilda says that she did, but stopped. And we see a huge amount of diaries behind her, and she says she ran out of shelf space, which takes advantage of her being so old. But it doesn't take advantage of her being a witch. She'd just make a bigger shelf, or shrink most of the diaries. Jughead's pal Hot Dog 3. Sabrina says Esmeralda brought a swing she could swing on at her place. Hilda says they have no tree in their backyard. I guess she knows that if a tree suddenly appeared in their backyard when the neighbors know that there isn't supposed to be one, she'd attract their attention and get people talking about her, especially if the tree vanishes later. Sabrina says this is why she's borrowing Hilda's broom. I guess she's doing this to save on magic. We see the cute side of Esmeralda swinging on a flying broom as Hilda's proud of her. Didn't this already happen? Life with Archie 278. Hilda says she read a newspaper article about a boy who collected too many baseball cards. Zelda says that's ridiculous. They think people collect silly things, and we see that Hilda's got a broom collection behind her as she wonders why people won't choose a sensible hobby. So the joke is hypocrisy. Betting me 183. Skywriters, that's kind of a cool name for a story. Hilda feels sorry for the people who travel on roads and are stuck in gridlock. That's out of character. She says they also have to worry about car repair. And then we see Hilda and Sabrina with some burns on their clothes and a few minor burns on their faces from lightning. Even though they wouldn't still be sitting upright if they were struck by it, and it would have been worse off than that. And you'd think that part of every magic broom would be anti-lightning force field spells. They would have cast that ahead of time. Laugh 21. Sabrina's told by Hilda that she decided not to give her a car for her birthday because she didn't want to saddle her with the expenses of insurance, gas, and parking fees. They're right. With her magic, she doesn't need a car, and she can always use Harvey for a car ride. So I can only assume that the reason she's still upset is that she wants a car to look cool and fit in with the other mortals in high school. She's mad at getting a broom because riding a broom to school is too conspicuous. And somehow she thinks she'd be laughed at by all of her classmates for it. Rather than them just assuming they hallucinated or freaking out because she's a witch. Like normal. No, instead she thinks they'd have the guts to laugh at her for it. But she can erase memories, so what's the problem? She also asks where she could park the broom at school. She could just warp it away and summon it to her locker later. She wishes there was a way to camouflage the broom, and then someone skates by her on a skateboard and is courteous enough to say hi to her. This gives her an idea. She saws the end off her special magic broom that was a gift from her aunt. For all she knows, that'll cut off magical features of it because that part of it could be made of specific potion ingredients. And she nails it to the bottom of her old skateboard. But she's still not conspicuous because the skateboard hovers. So the guy questions it. What was she thinking? She lies that it rides on a cushion of air. She sees someone doing tricks on a skateboard and recklessly says they could perform themselves despite a lack of talent. Some guys assume that she's gonna suck at it because she's a girl, so she uses the magic skateboard to do some tricks to impress them. As I still wonder why this new guy's with her so much and not Harvey, she wants to go see a rock band and tells him to hop on, and abandons all subtlety by flying over the rock stadium with it. And he's just impressed by it, luckily. So the story ends with Sabrina sweetly saying that she actually loves her present. This was a nice story where Sabrina has a clever idea to disguise her new flying broom. But she disguises it as a hoverboard. But at least she can have a chance of explaining it away as advanced technology. But she should know that because nobody else has one, she'd still attract attention from people wanting to study it or figure out how to get it if word gets out. So it's not conspicuous at all. But what I liked about that story was that it was still lighthearted. Even though it's obvious that she's using magic anyways, she still got to have a fun time with no consequences and even enjoy a rock concert. I'm wondering why there's this new guy instead of Harvey though. This guy doesn't have any flaws, but that makes him boring because being a nice skateboarder are only personality traits. Betty's Diary 34. Hilda wonders what happened at the dance to make Sabrina cry. Sabrina's embarrassed that someone wore the same dress as her. Hilda says that witches have to get used to that. But the joke doesn't work because every witch in the panel is wearing a different color. So that's not literally the same outfit. In the early days, a lot of times Zelda would wear the same color as her. So she has a point, but not in this panel. Laugh 22. Sabrina tells the audience that being a witch isn't different and that's a silly notion, and somehow doesn't see the irony when she says she doesn't need a road to ride a bike. She'd be compelled to only do it when no one's looking though. Since school cafeteria food is dull and dreary, she uses magic to give herself a delicious lunch, not caring that the students around her would notice. She would have only tried to get cafeteria food on the first day of high school then, and from that point on people would assume that she brought her own lunch, and plate, and forks, and no one would believe those two. Sabrina then uses magic on the school clock to make it so that the bell rings 15 minutes early, which confuses the teacher, but she somehow isn't shown telling the students to stay seated. Sabrina is shown swinging on a swing that hangs on an invisible platform in her backyard, which seems to be above the fences. Sabrina says that witches never lose their fondness for playing with dolls, even though she should know that using a voodoo doll doesn't count as playing with dolls. Then we see one of Sabrina's flowers in her garden say that it could use an extra shot of plant vitamins, when her neighbor is right next to her to hear it. Then Sabrina has trouble doing housework because her aunts insist on talking right behind her. She'd be doing that in her room, so why would they be there? So Sabrina decides to go to the quietest place in town to study, the graveyard, where she asks for help with her math homework and gets it from some ghosts. Because as the 70s comic established, witches and ghosts are used to each other and friendly for some reason. This story by George Glatter was about Sabrina using magic in her everyday life to make it better, with time skips in between each one. Her using magic on her cafeteria food and the school clock just makes a later issue of the 2000 Sabrina comic look less original, because that was done before by Sabrina, and yet that issue portrays her as above that. Usually I don't like stories that are nothing but time skips, but magic made it worth it. Archie 379. A large woman tells Sabrina that her daughter Esmeralda insists on having a dragon for a pet. Why did the artist never agree on a standard design for her mother? Her being large made her look like Zelda at first glance. Sabrina wonders if it's expensive, for apparently no reason. She says it costs a small fortune in mouthwash. But witches could zap up anything for free. Archie Giant Series 608. Sabrina says Hilda went to buy her a great outfit worn by a movie star. That was surprisingly nice of her. Let me guess, she'll be disappointed. Hilda brings her the witch costume from The Wizard of Oz because she wants her to dress like a witch, even though she'd know she wouldn't agree to it by now. Archie's Pals and Gals 217. Sabrina's impressed by all of the new phones in the window of the phone center, and Hilda has an amusing smile saying that she's one step ahead of them. And we see an old phone tied to the end of her broom. That was funny to see. Betty Me 185. Hilda loves the taste of something more than witch food, And Sabrina says that Hilda just discovered peanut butter, which she's putting on toast. I guess it makes sense because she always assumed she'd hate it, and only gave it a chance because she was feeling adventurous. Betty and Veronica, 32. Zelda wants to raise money for needy witches. It's unfortunately out of character for Hilda to not be mad at Zelda for being charitable, even to witches, because they're encouraged to be evil to everyone for no reason. Hilda says happily that Sabrina's one step ahead of her, and we see Sabrina doing a charity broom wash for witches. Apparently there's just that many witches who not only support charity but also would rather pay for this than waste a tiny bit of magic cleaning their own broom. That makes sense. But why would witches need charity when they could just zap up anything, including gold? And you'd think they would cure anything too. Jughead, 19. Sabrina loves looking at the shoe ads and says she loves shoes, except for Hilda's. Even though technically those are boots. They could have so easily been shoes like she usually wears. And why would Sabrina read something as depressing as the newspaper? I thought she wanted to see good things happen to people, to have a positive outlook.